The hills of odd West Virginia have always been quiet, their silence broken only by the distant hum of traffic, the barking of dogs, and the laughter that echoes faintly from the Whittaker family home. But lately, that quiet has felt uneasy every few months. The world seems to return to the Whittakers, not for their resilience, not for their daily lives, but for another controversy that swirls just beyond their front porch this time. It started with a car after months of tension, rumors and online speculation about money. Patrick returned to the Whittaker home with what he called a peace offering, a used but sturdy vehicle, parked right there in the dusty driveway. It gleamed faintly under the overcast sky, a symbol, perhaps, of reconciliation. The internet quickly dubbed it the car that broke the internet again. For Patrick, it was meant to be simple, a way to help Betty and Larry, the aging parents of the family, get around more easily. No cameras, no spectacle, just an act of goodwill. But nothing surrounding the Whittakers stays simple for long as word spread. So did confusion. Patrick's supporters saw generosity. His critics saw something else: control, manipulation, a PR move wrapped in kindness. And then came the stipulation that changed everything. BJ couldn't drive the car, according to witnesses and footage later shared online. Patrick had made one thing very clear when handing over the keys. "This is for Betty and Larry," he said. "BJ's not to drive it." The moment hung heavy in the air. Larry smiled, half confused, half grateful, while Betty stood silent, polite, hesitant, unsure if she should accept such a gift after everything that had unfolded between Patrick and the family in recent months. For outsiders, the exchange was touching. But for those who'd followed the saga closely, that one rule, that BJ couldn't drive, set off alarm bells. The comments online poured in. "You can't give someone a car with conditions. That's not a gift." Patrick's right. He knows BJ's past behavior. He's protecting them. Something about this feels off. Why film it at all? And beneath those voices, one truth remained: every move around the Whittaker family was now public theater. To understand the tension behind that car, you have to go back to the fractures that had already been exposed months before. Patrick's relationship with the Whittakers, once grounded in trust and compassion, had begun to crumble under the weight of fame, online scrutiny, and financial questions. Donations that once flowed freely were now under investigation, and rumors swirled about who controlled the funds meant for the family's care. Eric, once an ally, had drifted away, and Brian's videos hinted at government involvement, with whispers of adult protective services and state deadlines haunting Betty's small, white house. So when Patrick appeared again, smiling and carrying car keys, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a re-entry into a world he had once promised to protect, but had somehow lost control over, to the outside eye. Patrick looked like a man trying to make amends to others. He looked like someone trying to reclaim a story that had slipped through his hands. The footage that followed told two stories at once. Larry, standing near the car, looked cautious but grateful. "It ride good," he said with a grin. "Ain't drove it yet, but it ride good?" Patrick laughed. "It's yours?" "Larry, you and Betty's car got it for y'all." Betty, who had always been the quiet anchor of the family, seemed stunned. She thanked Patrick softly, her hands folded together. To anyone unfamiliar with the family's struggles, it looked like a wholesome moment, a man helping those in need. But longtime followers of the Whittaker story noticed what wasn't being said: the subtle undercurrent of control in Patrick's tone, the awkward body language, the fleeting look of confusion on Betty's face when she realized the car wasn't entirely theirs. Patrick explained later that the car, though intended for Betty and Larry, was technically in his name. He said it was to protect the investment, to make sure it wasn't sold or destroyed. The stipulation was simple: if BJ ever drove it, he'd take it back in the context of the Whittakers' lives. BJ's name carries weight. A member of the family, whose struggles with addiction have been publicly known. BJ has long been at the center of Patrick's difficult balancing act: helping without enabling, protecting without controlling. Patrick's decision to bar BJ from driving wasn't made lightly. Those who have followed the story closely understand his reasoning. BJ's erratic behavior, substance use, and history of taking vehicles without permission had caused damage and tension before. In one clip from a prior visit, Patrick had said, "I love BJ, but I can't let him ruin things for them again. They've lost too much already." So in Patrick's mind, This wasn't about power. It was about preservation, keeping Betty and Larry safe from more heartbreak. But the internet doesn't deal in nuance to critics. It was the ultimate act of hypocrisy, buying the family a car with their own money, as some alleged, and then dictating who could use it to supporters. It was the responsible move of a man trying to set healthy boundaries for a family that had long lived without them. In the middle of it all, Betty and Larry were left trying to navigate gratitude and confusion days later. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Creators broke down the footage frame by frame. The angle of Patrick's hand as he passed the key, the look on Larry's face, the car's make and model, even the body language of Betty in the background. Some called it staged, others called it proof that Patrick was still trying to help. One commentator said, "You can tell Patrick really cares, he's just tired. The man's been through hell with that family," another countered. "If he cared, he'd fix their house, not buy them a car they can't keep." As usual, the truth seemed lost somewhere in between. Behind the scenes, locals reported that the car was real, that it was indeed parked at the Whittaker home for several days before being moved to a nearby property for safekeeping. Some speculated that Patrick had taken it back temporarily after hearing BJ was trying to use it. Rumors spiraled again, this time not about the car itself, but about control. Was Patrick helping or managing? Was this kindness or an attempt to reclaim lost trust through ownership for Betty, who rarely speaks publicly? The noise must have been unbearable. She had always accepted the help that came her way: food, supplies, repairs, donations, with quiet humility. But she had also endured the weight of being the face of her family's story, one told and retold by strangers online now. Even something as simple as a car had become a symbol of controversy. Neighbors said she tried to ignore it. She'd smile and say, "It's nice to have something new," when asked about the car, then quickly changed the subject to the weather or her dog's Larry. Meanwhile, proudly showed off the keys, telling anyone who'd listen, "Patrick gave us that site, it's for us only." In their world, that gesture meant something real. It meant mobility independence, a small step toward normalcy. But in the digital world, it became a headline: "Patrick buys the Whittakers a car." But there's a catch. By the end of the week, the debate had evolved into something much bigger than a vehicle. It had become a referendum on Patrick himself. Was he still the man who'd introduced the world to the Whittakers out of compassion, or had fame changed his intentions? Was he protecting them, or protecting his image and truth? Those questions may never be answered. What was certain, though, was that every decision surrounding the family, even an act as ordinary as buying a car, would always carry extraordinary weight. The Whittakers, who once lived in obscurity, had become symbols of both empathy and exploitation. And Patrick, whether he wanted it or not, would always stand at the intersection of those two forces. The car was just the latest chapter, a physical object carrying the weight of everything that came before it. As Betty and Larry sat on their porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, the car keys glinted faintly in Larry's hand. He smiled to himself and said, "She rides good." And somewhere far beyond the hills of Odd, the internet debated what that meant. When the footage of Patrick gifting the car hit the internet, it exploded overnight. At first, it seemed like a redemption story. Patrick, who'd faced months of criticism, accusations, and strained relationships, had returned to do something kind. The YouTube title, "Patrick Buys the Whittakers a Car," spread like wildfire, with thumbnails of Larry grinning beside the vehicle and Betty's quiet smile framed in a still shot. But as with every Whittaker update, the positivity didn't last long. Within hours, the comment sections turned chaotic. Half of the viewers called it heartwarming. The other half called it staged. And the line that divided those sides wasn't about the car itself. It was about control. Patrick had made one condition crystal clear: BJ was not allowed to drive the car. The internet took that and ran with it. On one end, supporters defended Patrick's decision, calling it necessary. They pointed to BJ's history with drugs, the family's well-known struggles, and the danger that came from enabling destructive behavior. Patrick's doing the right thing. He knows BJ's patterns. You can't give freedom to someone who's going to wreck it. One commenter wrote, "He's protecting Betty and Larry, not punishing BJ." There's a difference, but others saw it differently. To them, This was yet another example of Patrick trying to control the family, deciding what they could have, how they could use it, and who was worthy of it. You can't call it a gift if you put rules on it. It's manipulation if it's in Patrick's name. It's not really theirs. That car isn't freedom, it's another leash. In a matter of hours, the conversation turned from kindness to controversy. The car itself became symbolic, a battleground of opinions, loyalties, and history. To the Whittakers, it was simply a means to get around. To the internet, it became a referendum on the ethics of charity and power. Videos analyzing every second of Patrick's visit flooded YouTube. One creator slowed down the footage to highlight Betty's reaction when Patrick handed her the keys. "She looks confused," the narrator said, almost like she didn't expect it or maybe didn't want it on those terms. Another creator zoomed in on Larry's hand gripping the keys and asked whether the vehicle had even been fully transferred to them. "If the car's in Patrick's name," he said, "then technically they don't own it. He does. And that's not a gift. That's a rental with emotional strings attached." The tone of these videos varied, some sympathetic, others mocking, but all of them drew thousands of views. The public, once united in fascination with the Whittaker family's unique story, was now divided into factions: Team Patrick, Team Whittaker, and Team Leave Them Alone. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere in Odd was changing too. Neighbors noticed more cars slowing down near the Whittaker home, more strangers stopping to take photos. A few even claimed they saw people trying to approach the car, hoping to get a look at the famous Range Rover Patrick bought. Local gossip mixed with online speculation until no one could tell what was true anymore. One local resident said, "They can't even breathe without the internet knowing that family's been turned into a TV show and now everyone's the director." Another added, "Patrick means well, but every time he shows up it brings the circus back." Amid the noise, Patrick remained mostly silent. He didn't post explanations or comment under videos. He didn't argue in live streams or respond to critics. He simply continued managing the family's affairs in small, measured steps. Though quietly, his actions spoke volumes. In a clip posted days later, Patrick could be heard saying, "The vehicle's in my name. If BJ drives it, it's gone. We're not doing that anymore." To many, this sounded firm and protective. To others, it sounded paternalistic. It revealed the ongoing struggle Patrick faced, trying to help people he deeply cared about, while also maintaining control over a situation that often spun out of hand. Meanwhile, Betty and Larry tried to enjoy their new gift for them. The car was practical. It meant rides to the store, medical appointments, and a chance to feel a little more self-reliant. Larry could be seen beaming, telling a visitor, "It ride good, ain't drove it yet, but it ride good." Betty, ever reserved, simply nodded, smiling faintly. "Thanks, Patrick," she said in her gentle voice. But beneath that gratitude lay a familiar discomfort. For years, their lives had been broadcast to millions of strangers, every gift, every argument, every mistake dissected and discussed. And though they never sought fame, it clung to them like dust from the unpaved roads outside their home. Now, even a car, something that should have brought relief, had become another headline in their story. And then there was BJ, the youngest of the family's adult members. BJ had long been a lightning rod for criticism and pity alike. His battles with addiction were no secret. His unpredictable outbursts, his moments of anger and relapse, were well documented in earlier videos. But BJ's defenders pointed out that behind those struggles was a man born into poverty, isolation, and a lifetime of misunderstanding. "He's not evil," one commenter wrote. "He's broken. There's a difference." When word spread that Patrick had forbidden BJ from driving, the internet began speculating about his reaction. Would he lash out? Would he disappear? A few days later, whispers began circulating online that BJ had been seen near the car. Some claimed he tried to take the keys. Others said Patrick had removed the vehicle temporarily, for maintenance. Nothing was confirmed, but the rumors fanned the flames of speculation again. "I told y'all BJ wasn't going to let that car sit. This is exactly why Patrick did what he did. If you give someone boundaries, they'll break them. It's just the nature of addiction. The story grew until it wasn't even about the car anymore. It became about control, consequence, and the never-ending tension between help and harm. Psychology channels began covering the situation, framing it as a case study in power dynamics. One creator said, "Patrick's behavior reflects a classic savior complex, where the helper begins to blur the lines between compassion and control." Another countered, "He's not a savior. He's a human being trying to do right by people who live." And through it all, BJ remained the invisible variable in local circles. He had become both the villain and the victim. People remembered his wild streak, the fights, the outbursts, the police visits. But they also remembered his laughter, his boyish grin, the way he doted on his family when sober. He was a man split in two, the BJ who wanted to do better, and the BJ who couldn't escape himself. Patrick's rule had reopened that wound. The idea that BJ was beyond trust, beyond redemption, that once again his actions had cost his family something precious. And though BJ never spoke publicly about the car, locals claimed they saw him pacing near the edge of the property, muttering to himself, frustration painted across his face. One said, "He didn't need to say anything. You could see it in his eyes. That car was a reminder that no one believed in him anymore." Then came the phone call in a leaked audio clip that surfaced on social media days later. Patrick could be heard explaining his decision to a supporter. His tone was weary, his words deliberate. "I had to take it back," he said. "BJ was already trying to drive it. Larry knows, Betty knows, they understand. I'm not doing this to be cruel. I'm doing it because every time I let my guard down, something bad happens." That statement split the internet all over again. Some sympathized, hearing the voice of a man who'd carried too much for too long. Others heard a confession, proof that Patrick's generosity came with strings attached he can't keep. "Playing savior and judge," one woman posted. "You can't hold power over people's lives like that." But another replied, "If he doesn't draw lines, they'll lose everything. He's the only one keeping them together." The truth sat somewhere in between, as it often did for Betty. It was heartbreak in slow motion. Every time someone stepped in to help, the world came with them: cameras, microphones, commentary, expectations. The peace she wanted for her family never lasted longer than a few quiet mornings. She said little, as always, but those close to her noticed the change. She seemed older, more tired. Her laugh, soft and infrequent, had nearly vanished when one neighbor asked her about the car. She sighed and said, "It was nice while it lasted." That single sentence carried the weight of years. Meanwhile, the outside world continued its relentless fascination. Reaction videos popped up faster than anyone could count. Some showed genuine sadness, others ridicule. A few creators even started mock fundraisers, joking about buying the Whittakers another car one BJ can't touch. The cruelty of the internet once again revealed itself in full force, and yet, amidst all the noise, a few voices cut through. People who truly understood the complexity of poverty, addiction, and trauma. They reminded viewers that what they were witnessing wasn't entertainment. One social worker commented anonymously, "This isn't a soap opera, it's generational trauma. The Whittakers have lived their entire lives without privacy, without support, and now they've become content every helping hand comes with a camera." That observation struck a chord because it was true. Every gift, every tragedy, every argument had become part of an online narrative where empathy was consumed like entertainment. And the car, once a gesture of kindness, was now just another episode. By the end of the week, a new video appeared, not from Patrick, not from Brian, but from a local resident who'd been quietly documenting the aftermath. The clip showed Larry walking down a dirt path, using a stick for balance, his cap pulled low against the afternoon sun. Betty followed behind, holding a small bag of groceries. No words were spoken. The camera lingered as they walked past the empty patch of gravel where the car once sat. Then Larry stopped, looked at the camera, and said softly, "It don't matter, we still walk." It was a line that silenced even the harshest critics, because in that moment, the story wasn't about Patrick or BJ or YouTube drama. It was about endurance, about a family that had survived everything, even kindness that came with a cost. And yet, the cycle was far from over. Within hours, commenters demanded that Patrick make things right. Some urged him to return the car, others to cut ties completely. But Patrick's silence spoke louder than any explanation could for months. He had tried to rebuild bridges, with money, with gifts, with apologies, but every time he extended his hand, the world twisted it into a headline in private. Friends said he was considering stepping away from the entire situation, the channel, the fundraising, even contact with the family. "He's exhausted," one friend confided. "He's tired of being called a saint one day and a snake the next." It was a realization many had predicted but few had wanted. Patrick might finally walk away for good for the Whittakers. Life would go on, slower, simpler, quieter, but the internet would not. The next controversy was already brewing. Another rumor, another video, another analysis, because for millions watching online, the Whittaker story was never about the truth. It was about the reflection of humanity they saw, or refused to see, in that small home in Odd, West Virginia, and as the sun set over the hollow, Betty turned off her porch light, the shadows settling in around her. The car was gone, the noise had faded, but the story, as always, was far from finished. The hills around Odd, West Virginia, had grown quiet again. The dust that once rose around the that was the impossible bind of his involvement. To step back meant betrayal, to stay meant endless controversy. And so, Patrick chose silence. No more posts, no more videos, no more updates. He let the public draw their own conclusions. Meanwhile, life in Odd went on, quietly, imperfectly, the way it always had. The house still leaned slightly on its foundation. The porch light still flickered. The familiar faces, Larry's gentle grin, Betty's thoughtful eyes, and the shadow of BJ wandering the property, remained the same. Locals said that after the dust settled, the family seemed more at peace without cameras around. Betty was seen tending her garden again. Larry chatted with neighbors about the weather, and BJ, well, BJ was still BJ, unpredictable, sometimes distant, but always returning home. The car's fate. Unclear. Some claimed it was still nearby, parked off the main road, used sparingly for errands. Others believed Patrick had taken it for good. But to those living there, it didn't matter, because the car, in the end, wasn't the point. It was a symbol of how far good intentions could go before they turned into control, of how compassion could become performance, of how the internet could strip humanity from the people it claimed to care about. Months later, a small update appeared buried deep in a Facebook group dedicated to the Whittakers. A photo, grainy, taken from a distance, showed Larry sitting on the porch again, a blanket over his knees, Betty beside him. Waving at someone unseen, the caption read, "They're doing okay, still smiling. Still here." It was the kind of post that went unnoticed by most. No drama, no shock, no arguments. Just two people living their lives as the world moved on. But for those who had followed their story from the beginning, it was the most comforting update of all for Patrick. There was no grand exit, no final speech, no closure. He simply disappeared from the public eye. His name, once trending weekly, faded from search results. Some say he found peace in stepping away. Others believe he still checks in quietly, making sure the family has what they need without fanfare or cameras. Whatever the truth, it no longer mattered to him. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes helping isn't about giving more. It's about letting go, and for the world watching. Maybe that's what this story was always about. Not the car, not the conditions, not the drama between Patrick and BJ, but the uncomfortable truth that compassion and control often walk the same line, and that crossing it, even with the best intentions, can change lives forever. The Whittakers remain as they always have been. Flawed, human, surviving. Betty, quiet and steady, still holds her family together. Larry, proud and patient, still greets the world with kindness. And BJ, restless and unpredictable, still fights his private battles, sometimes losing, sometimes winning. The cameras may have left, but the story continues, not on YouTube, not on Facebook, not in comments or headlines, but in the small, ordinary moments of a family that endures despite everything. The world moves on. The noise fades. And the Whittakers, they simply keep living. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.